I am here. Holy Cross is Dan Shaughnessy to you.
Oh, there we go.
Thank you very much.
There we go. Go Crusaders. Yes.
Hey, we got a wagon up there with a football team. What are they, 7-2? They're crushing it this year.
Yeah, they're doing pretty well this year. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, listen, your book is great. Wish it lasted forever. Life with the Larry Bird Celtics. I got to tell you, my father was the Boston Celtics were his religion. He was from Taiwan, but he came over here in the 60s when the Celtics were on fire and just fell in love with them. He thought Red Auerbach was God, Larry Bird was Jesus, the whole deal. And this team from the 80s, I don't think there could ever be a team like this in the NBA as the NBA is right now ever again. Is that fair to say?
It was so much fun. Yes, absolutely. I mean, I was inspired. I was the beat guy for the Globe. The wonderful Mary Shane was covering for the Worcester Telegram at that time, and she's cited multiple times in the book because Larry Bird really liked Mary Shane, and she was a no-nonsense, good reporter, a wonderful woman. And, of course, Bill Doyle, we got all the guys out there. But it's been... it was my privilege to get to be with this team every day in the 80s. And, during the early days of the pandemic, you're seeing no games, and it was awful. And The Last Dance was appointment TV every Sunday night, and then they started showing those Celtics classics on Comcast in the 80s. And I keep seeing my 28-year-old self with his giant head of hair and big Michael Caine glasses sitting at the table. And I remembered, hey, yeah, I was around that. I've been telling those stories for 40 years. And in those days, they gave the lowly writers those great seats. Bud would be down there with us, and Doyle and Mary, and we'd all be side by side. John Guerin was part of that. And it was just great times. And we now, of course, they got smart, and they sell those seats for thousands of dollars, and they kicked us upstairs. But in those days, there was no moat between us and the players. And being the Globe beat guy, I travel with them, flights, hotels, commercial flights, airports, waiting for bags, having drinks in the bar. And this book is a fun look at what that was like, because we could really tell you what Bird and Parrish and McHale were like. And the new reporters, it's not their fault. They can't get close to Tatum or Brown, or the moat is there. And we don't know what the dissension is with the team this year or what's going on, but back then we knew. We knew they didn't like Bill Fitch that last year. We knew they loved Casey Jones. We knew that Bill Walton's wife hired a stripper on his birthday to come to Hellenic College and perform during practice. I mean, just stuff that you could never do today. This thing's a lot of fun, and Wish It Lasted Forever is all about that.
Yeah, you. On a side note, you looked exactly like, and I'm sure you've heard this before, you looked like Napoleon Dynamite back in the 80s.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I got a lot of Napoleon Dynamite going on in all those pictures, no question.
You're a dead ringer, for sure. Yeah, this game is not only, this book is not only about the team, but how the NBA was covered back then. And you mentioned it right there. It wasn't such a huge business back then. There's a part where, and especially with someone like Larry Bird, there's like a part in the book where he's like, I can't see spending, I'm paraphrasing here, I can't see spending $50,000 on a car when the house I grew up in wasn't even worth $10,000. And it's I think that attitude's gone in the NBA.
Oh yeah. I mean, he grew up poor, and a lot of today's players grew up poor.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're also getting their ass kissed by the time they're 14 years old in those AAU programs, and they come into it thinking they're special, and there's not as much dues paying or maybe, I don't know, respect for what came before you. But Bird really had that. He wanted to know about Wilt Chamberlain, and he wanted to know about Oscar Robertson, and he never lost the value of how much money he was getting to play basketball. He couldn't believe it. When that first three-point contest, he was like a dog with raw meat in front of him. He couldn't believe they were going to give him $10,000 to make a bunch of threes at the All-Star game, because that money really meant something to him, and he loved to shoot baskets. And it was just, I just feel, it wasn't about the brand or talking to your friends and meeting at the All-Star game and talking about how we're going to all play together next year. I mean, he hated Bill Laimbeer. He didn't want Laimbeer to be in the Eastern Conference All-Stars because he didn't want to practice with him or have to ride in the bus with him. I mean, it wasn't like they were all hugging after the games back then. And this sounds like, the old guy get off my lawn thing, and I try to avoid that. There is an element of that because it was just really fun. It was different. It was special. And that's, we tried to kind of encapsulate that fun and joy that they had for each other in the covers of this book.
It's amazing how that team transformed after they got Larry Bird, because the late 70s Celtics, I just remember my father in misery. There was just so terrible. And it was such a shame to see John Havlicek end his career in such an awful season. And what was it with him that lifted everybody else up? I mean,
there was a surge there. They had bottomed out. I think they won 29 games the year before, and then he came in. ML Carr came in, and Bill Fitch was the new coach. They had a whole transformation, and there was just good energy. And Collins had 1 year left him at that point, and he stuck around. John was gone, as you say, and they bring in Tiny Archibald, and it got good pretty fast. They went to 62 wins. It was the quickest one-season turnaround anyone had, and then a year later they win the championship in Bird's second year. Maxwell's MVP of the finals. Max was a transition guy. He was part of the disaster at the end, but then he accepted his role. When Bird got here, he said, "You're going to get the ball a lot less and have to guard the best guy on the other end," and he accepted that. He talks about that in the book because McHale came in the year after Bird. Maxwell's touches went down every year of his career after Bird got here, but he didn't complain about it. He complains about getting a Seiko watch for the Finals MVP instead of a car like Bird got, but that's another story altogether because Max loves talking about that. I got a freaking watch, he said. That's what I got.
Well, that's another thing you talk about. So Cedric Maxwell this is how in you were with the team. So Cedric Maxwell had, people call him Cornbread Maxwell. That was his nickname. Robert Parrish was chief. But then there were nicknames that only the team gave each other, that they only knew, and that you, as someone who was so involved with the team, the relationship you built with the team, that you only knew, right? And that's how in you were with these guys.
It was weird things because around the team, everybody called ML was Froggy. Max was the commissioner of all the names, and Chris Ford was Doc. I mean, no one calls Chris Ford Doc unless you were traveling with that team. It was some stupid play in practice where he tried some cradle dunk or something like that and, jammed his hand on the rim or something. And they were like, "Oh, you're imitating Julius Erving now. We're going to call you Doc." So Chris Ford became Doc the rest of his life around that team. His head coach of the team, Larry was still calling him Doc. And, there was, Gerald Henderson was Sarge. He wore a stupid outfit one day that had some sort of military stripes on it, so he was Sarge. And I was Scoop, of course, because I was always trying to get the damn scoop. And everybody, one time I told Quinn Buckner, I wrote that he played like a man with no clue. Oh, Max loved that. He said he called him Inspector Clouseau for the rest of his life. There he is, Inspector Clouseau.
It's, the more I read about this team, the more they kind of remind me of the 2004 Red Sox. They were kind of like this ragtag crew it was all about the chemistry, really.
Yeah, it's really true. And they were very secure in how good they were. And that way you didn't have a lot of the pettiness or how many touches I'm getting or who's getting more points. And, it was really good-natured. And the practices were hilarious because, Walton and Parrish would go at each other. Bird and Scott Wedman would go at each other. And, it was serious. They really were competitive. They'd stay after and go one-on-one. Angel played McHale one-on-one after practice. And it was really funny. And it was very competitive. But nobody was ego to the point where they were wounded if they lost or something. They would just laugh about it and go on to the next thing. And there's a wonderful start where Bruce Hurst comes in. Bruce Hurst was friends with with Ainge. Both Mormons, Major League Baseball players, and Bruce had lived at Danny's house. And Bruce would come over to practice, and he's a left-hander starter for the Red Sox, but he couldn't believe the difference in how these guys had fun and how they were confident in their own abilities, didn't take criticism badly, didn't have all the petty spite stuff that was around the Red Sox clubhouse. And he has this lovely passage at the end of the book where he just talks about the difference between being in the Celtic locker room and in the Red Sox locker room. And I witnessed it because I switched beats at the end of my Celtic days and went over to cover the 86 Red Sox, which was a pack of very difficult personalities. And Hurst had a handle on why that was and how different it was, because these Celtics were not like that. They were very confident in their own skins and very secure in how good they were.
Well, Bill Walton does have a line in there, and again, I think I'm getting this right. He said something to the effect of, in your book, "You will never be able to overstate how much fun we had." And for Bill Walton, Bill Walton's a guy who knows how to have fun. Yeah. And so, which is a great line. Well, it's a really great read. It's a lot of fun, Dan. There's so many great stories in there about such a great team, and could be still the greatest basketball team in NBA history. And I'm a homer, though.
I'm with you on that. And McHale talks about at the end. He says, if they let us play by the rules of today, we win. Bring it on.
Right? Yeah. Not a Kyrie Irving among them back in the 80s, right? Exactly.
That's right.
Yeah. All right. Well, Dan Shaughnessy, thanks. The book is Wish It Lasted Forever, Life with the Larry Bird Celtics. It's a very entertaining read, even if you're not a basketball fan. It's a lot of fun. And thanks for hopping on here, man. I really appreciate it.
Anything for Worcester. Take care, guys.